James worked as a senior policy advisor in the UK Prime Minister's Strategy Unit and also for several think tanks in London and Washington, D.C. V. Sunil, our next panelist, began his career in India's foremost advertising agencies, including Contract and O&M in Delhi. During his tenure as creative director at O&M, he created several marketing initiatives, including Incredible India. As the executive creative director of Whedon & Kennedy India, Sunil helped build some of the country's strongest brands. He has also coined the phrase Make in India, the campaign that is already underway in the city. Right from the launch to the unprecedented citywide campaign, he has conceptualized and overseen various aspects of this nation-building campaign. He is also a founder trustee of the Kochi Biennale. Sidharth Bhatia, who will be moderating the discussion, is a journalist, columnist, and author, and is the founder-editor of The Wire.in, a digital news platform of opinion and reportage. He was part of the core team that launched the English daily DNA in 2005. Currently, he writes regularly on current affairs and popular culture in publications such as the Times of India, Mint, and the Hindustan Times. His latest book, The Patels of Film India, was published last year.
Welcome, friends. Before we come to, I didn't realize after I heard the title of this event in detail, the media's perception. Before we bring the media in, I think we should talk about basically what is Make in India, because there is the citizens' perception, I may say, that it is an initiative from the Prime Minister's office and from the Government of India to get the world to come and manufacture here. That much one understands.
Right.
So is it much more than that? Since you coined the phrase, is it much more than that?
So you are right. It is to kind of encourage better manufacturing. And you can hear, right? And also foreign investment. So that's how the first time when we started talking about it, so that was the first round of discussion. So we've had ideas like, invest in India and, like all the first cut thoughts. Then we said, like an idea or a program like this needs much more kind of larger ambition. Therefore, like the naming or the canvas itself can be much bigger. Because, when you have a sort of ecosystem of government support and then thinking like ours, we thought, we can actually pitch for something much heavier and put sort of pressure on everyone to kind of get after something bigger. So when our first presentation to the Secretary of DIPP, the first page said, Industrial Revolution Part 2. So they all kind of looked at me like, what do you mean? Normally like our presentations are like, like white background, very simplistic. But this one we went all red and big black, one of those.
Industrial Revolution Part 2. A little ambitious.
A little ambitious. So everyone like, like what do you really mean? We're like, this is only for us to kind of understand the ambition and put a pressure on the working group to always think like much bigger than what we're kind of starting off with. I think, so, when we have a strong campaign, right, what happens is that it put pressure on the system. And very easy to do a campaign, very easy to do a messaging, but on the back of that, I've seen kind of change taking place. So that's what the thinking process was. Therefore, word like Make in India, then we said we need to have a strong, iconic symbol. That something we were very clear from beginning. We wanted to have something very, very strong, because I just find that, after, let's say, the Ashoka, we've never had a strong symbol. Every time, we had to celebrate 50 years of independence or 60 years independence, we always did this kind of funny, like, breaststroke of this Indian flag. So, none of them were, to me, were really strong symbols. There was nothing young people could kind of hold on to, wear it on a t-shirt. So this was kind of a rough thought process, and that's how we kind of launched.
No, we'll be discussing this because I think you've tossed quite a few ideas into the air.
Yeah.
I find it very interesting. You say after the Ashoka, there's another symbol as such,
Yes.
something you can grasp.
Yeah.
So it's almost like saying, over the years we've been doing all kinds of things, but now we have something to hold on to to say the Ashoka period had, spread a certain sense of ideas, values, whatever, because that's what it was.
Yes.
And now this.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to, we'll be exploring that.
Yeah.
What the CV didn't tell the audience, James, is that the Prime Minister's policy unit, the Prime Minister was Tony Blair, and the policy unit was doing a lot of interesting things, including coming up with initiatives just like this called Cool Britannia. At that time, it was on the cover of all magazines, and suddenly Britain, that the world knew, which was seen to be a little old-fashioned, there was a young Prime Minister, and it was Cool Britannia. Though I remember reading about it, not because I was around, about the cool 60s, the swinging 60s. So what was Cool Britannia? What was the thinking behind it in the policy unit, and what came out of it?
So this was a little bit before my time. This was sort of around the time when Tony Blair was first elected in the UK, which was in 1997. I worked in the strategy unit for his administration a little later than that. But the perception was that Britain's national brand was very old-fashioned, and that people saw this as a country of terrible weather, bad food, low-quality manufacturing goods. That's all totally untrue, as any of you who've been there will know. But at about the same time, London in particular had a sort of kind of flourishing moment with, I don't know, some rock band said he's sounding like an elderly gentleman, and a vibrant fashion scene and cultural industries. And the government tried to take advantage of this by promoting the idea of Cool Britannia. And sort of sitting on top of that was this notion of nation branding, that you could, as a country, think of ways in which you could project or change the image of your country. Some other examples would have been, so Spain, for instance, if you think of the brand of Spain, then the Miro image with the kind of the bull and the España sign, that was done very deliberately by the Spanish government. It didn't happen by accident. There are other countries that it's happened sort of slightly more accidentally to. Ireland managed to move its image, somewhat to do with the government, from being a traditional Catholic country to being a Celtic tiger. And I suppose in the same way, India has done the same thing with things like the Incredible India campaign. I mean, I guess we can kind of kick around the pros and cons of this. A lot of people dislike the idea of nation branding because nations are very complicated and have multifaceted cultural identities, and brands tend to pick only one element of them, and also they tend to be thought up by branding gurus who are often seen, with present company accepted, to be indistinguishable from charlatans. But on the other hand, I think most of us can recognize that there are aspects to countries that you warm to or are critical of, and in the case of India, actually it's going through the very Mr. Modi, for his many assets and his faults, has a real grasp of this, and so has gone through a whole bunch of areas, not just Make in India, but you could argue yoga. The International Yoga Day is in effect a kind of branding exercise, trying to associate the country with a cultural export. The way in which the BJP has attempted to appropriate the image of Gandhi for Swachh Bharat, with the image of him with his circular glasses, is a branding exercise. And so, I mean, you think you can kick this around a little bit and say, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Can you do it in the absence of other things? But certainly Modi has shown himself to be very adept at understanding that branding is very important in the projection of a national image.
No, we won't. We'll allow the audience to make up its mind. We'll allow everyone else to make up their minds. But just to, if you can give a supplementary question, Cool Britannia was in the 90s.
Yeah, Tony Blair late 90s.
Yeah, Tony Blair came, went, several things happened, other prime ministers have come. Where do you see it many years later? Is it Cool Britannia, or is it Britannia which is about to split up? Or is it Britannia which is,
I I'm not sure I have a view on the future of my own nation. Basically, Cool Britannia gets a pretty bad rap now. I mean, as almost with anything that is attempting to be fashionable, when it goes out of fashion, then, you know, it's like flared trousers and paisley pattern shirts. I mean, everyone looks back on it with a sort of slight grimace, as if Cool Britannia and Blur and Oasis and Pulp and Tony Blair having Noel Gallagher around for tea at number 10, that this was a bit like your dad trying to get into a new form of music, this terrible embarrassment. But actually, you know, I can defend it. If you look at the current British branding campaign, which is called the Great Campaign, which you see from time to time on billboards, it sort of says Britain is great. Many of the elements you see there are the same. You know, they've somehow reappropriated the Union flag and made it seem less fusty. There's been a professionalization in the way that the country has tried to project itself. So, I don't know. I mean, I think for the purposes of this discussion, you can count me probably as a journalistic skeptic of the idea of nation branding, but it's not total nonsense, if you see what I mean. There are certainly, you can see it when it isn't there. If you see a country that doesn't know how to do these things, I would say a country, and this is thin ice, but if you were to compare India to Pakistan, India clearly is much better at this than Pakistan is. Pakistan pays no attention to this at all for whatever reason. And you can tell that when you think about the countries and their images. So, I don't know, I can defend Cool Britannia to a degree.
Now, you know, the initiative, the way you told us about the process,
Yeah.
obviously the thought process came from a certain thinking
Right.
within the establishment.
Yeah.
You were brought in and you gave your professional skills.
Right.
Can brandings
Yeah.
as an idea, as a concept, be imposed,
Yeah.
A, and two, should a brand and can a brand concentrate on one area or encapsulate an entire ethos?
I think depends, you know, like, so maybe like brands like Make in India can do that. I can give you many examples. Like, you know, if you look at Indigo, is one such example where everything kind of come together, you know, whether it is the message you see on the plane or whatever outward projecting thing, and but operationally, somewhere it all comes together, you know. So when that happens, it's like perfect. But in a case like, you know, Make in India, I think.
This is a nation, not us.
Yeah.
A corporate entity.
Exactly. So what happens, you know, like say when we were doing Incredible India, now that's a tourism campaign, but we got like lot of rap for that, you know. So I think like third year into the campaign, there was a Time magazine article which said, you know, like someone had a really bad experience driving from somewhere in UP to Delhi, and he just trashed the campaign. Like, so I was like, you know, just feeling really depressed about that. I don't know why. And then we had a meeting with the secretary that time in tourism. But he was sitting there with someone from World Bank. They're like, listen, like, don't worry about that. We have to do our job well, because this is a tourism campaign. I mean, now, whether it is a national campaign or a tourism campaign, how do you kind of separate? You can't. But for the operational team, I think it's important to separate it and then drive it, because if you wait for everything to get perfect in a country like ours, we will never be able to do anything.
No, that's understandable.
Yeah.
But if you have an Incredible India campaign,
Yeah.
and on the ground level,
Yeah.
you have education campaign,
Yeah.
which may take 10 years,
10 years, yeah.
to show how to treat a tourist.
Yes. Yeah.
The same way,
Yeah.
if the last mile inspector
Yeah.
also falls
Yeah.
into place with Make in India,
Yeah.
only then does it really become.
Absolutely. So, like, I think we all are aware that, you know, this Make in India campaign, it's not a celebration, right? It's an invitation. We are saying, come Make in India, right? Which means we got to start now, start cleaning up, you know, start training, you know. So I've seen, like, in the last 1 year, you know, that the change had started from Mr. Amitabh Kant, who's the secretary in the government, right? And I've seen in like the third month, the more and more officers who are like in shock at the speed in which we are operating. Like, they could not deal with that speed the first 1 week. And then they saw the launch and they saw the quality of thinking and that idea. Suddenly everyone started kind of owning something or the other, right? So the big change first happened in Udyog Bhavan. And now, you know, I can see slowly in different departments it's happening. But I think it's going to take a long time. So finally, like someone, like you're saying, finally like an inspector or someone sitting in some panchayat office has to change. Now that change will come with a lot of training. They're doing a lot of workshops, you know. Prime Minister had 2 workshops already, like one was with all the secretaries. The whole day was spent at Udyog Bhavan for them to come back with ideas which they had to present and implement. So all that's been going on. So I think we are talking about, if you ask me, it will take a long time, but the plan is in place and the training has to happen and people have to change. We are talking about 60, 70-year-old thinking to really change. You know?
No, the other thing is, does something like Make in India or anything else, which is not a tourism campaign, I want to emphasize that, really affect international or even national perception? Because a country is a mix of so many things going on. So for example, I'm an investor sitting far away and I say, yes, I think I need to move my factory from China to India and I will deal with the hassles, that's not a problem. But some of the headlines that are emanating out of India are scaring me. Right?
Not in the FT, I hope.
Not in the FT,
the FT headlines are always, I think, I don't think anyone has any complaints about the FT. But a lot of the headlines that are coming to me, and these need not be the usual kind of headlines like, you know, safety of the women and all that. Maybe not. But there are many other things that are constantly coming to me. How are you going to, how is Make in India going to cover those weaknesses, if I may call them
so that? There are 2 things, right? So when we first started thinking about it, the messaging and, you know, what should be the kind of outward feel of this whole brand, FT really helped us actually with that. Because, you know, this whole Brick Nation...
How did we do that?
Brick Nation discussion has been now turned into what they call Fragile 5. I think it was coined by FT, right? So that gave us some sort of confidence because if you look at all the other Brick Nations, India is the only one where you can actually confidently come and invest because everyone is in some sort of trouble or the other. If you are like a big investor or a big company, all the other 4, you got trouble, right? You go to Russia, you go to
Brazil, Russia.
So that is like one big positive thing. Then a recent example, I just don't know how that happened, but sometimes just the sheer energy and the kind of, in this case, bit of style, bit of strength in character, all that, people can actually see, of course, the change is now started. Then they start looking at that project very differently, right? So last year, 6 months back, we had Hanover Messe. And we were
sorry, what was that?
Hanover.
I know.
It's such a big industrial thing. And we were the partner country. So this was, after the launch of Make in India, this was the first opportunity we had to show something to the world that how, like, what's happening with the manufacturing and, you know, like, what's really going on in the country. So we had a really beautiful exhibition of a lot of the Indian products or Indian companies working with Germany and things like that. And when we went in, you know, the general, you know, sentiment that time was what's going to happen in India, and especially with the BJP, and there was a lot of, you know, kind of confusion. But the week after Hanover Messe, you know, series of presentations and the way we kind of projected ourselves across Europe that time, mainly in Germany, was really eye-opening for a lot of people. So our ambassador there, he had told us, I couldn't believe that in 1 week's time, things can actually change. So there was a real perception change he could feel from a lot of industrial leaders and, you know, generally around that region. Now he's become like one of the biggest supporters of Make in India. He's running a lot of the road shows. Similar thing happened in, in the US also. Like if you go to, let's say the California and that region, the tech community, they suddenly have a different kind of approach towards India. And, you know, like people like, you know, Cisco, you know, John Chambers, they all now talk about...
Are you suggesting that they are looking at India as a destination because of this?
Yeah.
What do you, let me have a crack at this.
The energy, I think the energy of like how they're looking at the country, it's changed, especially because of now the Prime Minister is going all over the place.
No,
meeting
but
people.
that would have happened in any case.
Yeah.
And the BRICS thing happened fortuitously.
Yeah.
But are they now saying, let's go there because we see a new kind of atmosphere emerging?
Yeah, the lot of that's been, I've been listening to a lot of these people, even today at the CNN Asia Business Forum at MMRDA grounds. Everyone has been just talking about this is a country to invest. Even yesterday, like the 3 prime ministers, I think Make in India has given a platform for people to kind of get into that kind of space. I don't know that the campaign alone will do anything, but they are now seeing more and more people, the people they can do business with, not just the government, like other companies, they are partnering with. There is definitely an energy shift that you could feel.
Well, I mean, take a step back. So Make in India as a notion is trying to answer a problem. I think when you talk about brands, often it has a rather kind of elliptical quality to it, that it's like trying to kind of catch smoke with a butterfly net, that you don't really know what you're talking about. But Make in India is an attempt to solve a very practical problem, which is that India has had a problem in its manufacturing sector. It's too small. People didn't view India as a place you could come and set up factories. As Sid said, they weren't trusted. And this has been a very long-standing problem. It's been true for 20 years that India has a much smaller manufacturing sector than other comparable nations. And so what you can say for this campaign was that when Mr. Modi came in, he, with this, along with maybe half a dozen other big campaigns, the Swachh Bharat was one, toilets was another, Digital India was another. There've been he kind of focused attention on these things by creating this name with a brand. And the brand, I think as a consumer, the brand, the lion, the cogs, like it's been quite successful. It's recognizable. You could wear, I actually did try and find a Make in India t-shirt, but I couldn't
It'll
find
happen.
one.
Colaba Causeway, any day now.
Yeah. The question, I suppose, is how far that gets you. And I think it gets you some distance. That if you're a foreign investor, the notion that there is this campaign, it has a nice sort of logo, the prime minister's behind it, they're having these big events, like that isn't worthless. You look at that and you think, okay, these guys to some degree have their shit together. But it isn't a replacement for a policy. And so that's kind of, I think, the dilemma here, that nobody would suggest that you can manage things with brands alone, but there is a danger that the policymakers become very focused on developing brands and actually forget to improve the roads, make the power run on time, reform the labor laws, the things that will actually help a foreign investor come. But certainly Make in India under this government is far better than the situation under the previous government, where there was just nothing. You had no coherent sense of how the country was trying to project itself. So in that sense,
So
I think...
actually, I personally look at it and I think that it's brought together a lot of thinking. And perhaps, and I'm sure that's happening, but I'm not privy to it. Perhaps it's also, there is a recognition that we are dealing with a whole set of infrastructural as well as weaknesses of a cultural kind also,
of course.
which we have to change. So if push comes from the very top, now my question, and I think these are the questions that a lot of people will be raising, and perhaps you've incorporated them in your thinking.
Of course,
and that is to say, there have been road shows in the past. There was India Shining 12 years ago. There have been all kinds of other top-down pushes till at every level, and that includes, by the way, the industrial partner here, his manufacturing ability, the money that the banks have, all those things. Unless all that starts changing. So is there a game plan for that?
Definitely there's a game plan. So even at the launch stage, from the first idea to like the launch, originally we thought we will launch it and use the next 6 months to do all the policy changes and this, that, the other. Then we realized that cannot happen, because when you launch, the day one, people are going to get on line and they're going to check what has actually happened, why are we going and saying Make in India. So before the launch, in that 1 month, at least on paper, there were 3 big policies that changed. Labor laws, like the FDI, a lot of changes had happened. But now if you see, earlier, if government has started, like, especially from a center, if there was any kind of initiative, you will have like 3 states against it. But in the case of Make in India, every state, now everyone is competing for that same pie, like where the investments are coming from. Look at every state now. They're all pushing for larger investment, they're pushing for better manufacturing. Everyone is pushing. If you see like Make in India Center, everyone is fighting for the Make in India week to shift to the other states. So there is a feeling of competition now between states to get better. But that's...
No, so are you saying there is a political buy-in?
Of course, all states. That you can see very clearly. Everyone is like bought into this program. And then I've forgotten the numbers, like in certain cases there are like whatever, there's some 300 approvals to build something that's brought down to let's say 70, where the earlier 70 approvals is brought down to 10. So the age-old problem is being like getting resolved on a kind of a weekly basis, And one thing I can tell you that I'm not really like supporting the campaign. I know there's like, I know better than everyone else that there's
You're not supporting it.
You should be
a big advocate.
There's so many issues we got to deal with. But one thing I can tell you that everyone is working all the time, not wasting a single minute. And they work at a speed you can't imagine government can work. Because I work with other corporate side also. Now to do a campaign of this scale and do something like the Make in India week in Bombay, I cannot think of a single corporation who will do it at this speed and just get after it,
I think, Sid, another thing to think about is that the kind of branding conceptually, it sort of has to be plausible. And this is, you can't kind of put lipstick on a pig, that in the end, if the Indian manufacturing sector is hopeless, and it's incredibly difficult to do manufacturing here, then in the end this campaign will fail. Cool Britannia worked to a degree that it did because there was something going on in London at that time. If you tried to do Cool Cardiff, it wouldn't have worked.
I know that. But in fact, it had to come. Cool Britannia was something, as you said, there was already a rock and pop and a fashion and a young scene in London, and the government kind of encapsulated that. Again, to continue, I'm sorry to interrupt, but continue. My fear is, and I think that might be the fear of a lot of people, is that the manufacturing sector, and that does not mean the government, the corporate sector itself, and the people may not be ready for it. So the weakness may lie inside.
Maybe. I mean, as I say, in the end, if they don't follow up with political reforms to make it easier to do manufacturing in India, then the whole thing will have been for naught. But it's plausible at least to argue that it will make it. So I had a conversation on the phone this afternoon with the chief executive of Ericsson, the Swedish manufacturer. He clearly had his attention caught by Make in India. The heads of companies who you want to come and invest, they are people. They read the same newspapers that we do. If something looks coherent and enticing, they're as likely to notice it as anyone else. And that's true with nations as a whole, I think, that in the end, if you're going to talk in this terms of sort of branding a country or a part of a country, that it has to, in some sense, link to what is actually there. And in that sense, India has many advantages. I mean, I think India, whether it's through its government or tourism, Bollywood, there are all sorts of things about Indian culture that actually they're kind of facet of what you'd call the country's soft power that give it a great number of advantages compared to comparable Asian countries. So, but that doesn't exist sort of separately from what's underneath, if you see what I mean. So,
there is always a fear. Sunil, I think we do understand that's being talked about for many years, that there is a India, there is a Bharat.
Of course.
And there is a sense that a lot of attention and mind space and media space, and I'm coming to the media. Media space is devoted to the idea that what's good for business is good for the country. That other things that we can't really see beyond that darkness don't matter. Is that something that you have thought about at all? And is the media going to point that out?
So one thing, I don't think about the negatives. So what I strongly believe that if you're like heart and mind is in the right place, and if you get the buy-in from the rest of the ecosystem, you can actually drive a big idea, and you can just keep at it. And I think what happens is that very often, like, after a couple of years, kind of lose energy, and people move, something happens, and it kind of like fall apart. But if that doesn't happen, I think it's important to just be very positive. And because in a country like ours, there's so many problems, right? You can never start anything. Look at the startup culture. All these kids, earlier, they were looking for a job. Now they're job creators. Big shift. They are not waiting for government to help. They are not waiting for any handouts. They're just out there doing things, So I think that is also very Indian, which is this whole enterprising spirit. But they are like 21-year-old kids are running large companies, and they are creating jobs, right? So I think, like, if you ask me, I just don't look at that side. I can see it, but I just don't deal with it.
No, the reason I ask is, and that's in fact, that is the possibly the best approach to have, because otherwise we are never going to go anywhere. No, but the reason I ask this is, let's take one important aspect, and that applies to smart cities, that applies to Make in India land. And that requires change of laws,
of course.
Talking to the farmer who has to give up. In Gujarat, the new smart city has come unstuck because people are saying, I'm not going to give up the land on the terms I had agreed to a little while ago. So those things are going to start emerging. I'm not asking about you. I'm saying, has there been policy thinking on how to constantly deal with these issues?
I've seen some part of the smart city, the original presentation. So one of the things they're doing is they're actually starting now. Unlike earlier times, they would just go and say, like, this is how it's going to work, and we want to do something, and it's not China. Then things don't work, right? So they are starting with, they are going to like really small villages where like just 30,000 people are living, and there's been an education program to bring them in. So the thinking has been completely different. Really smart people are working on it, and if the plans go well, I think we will have to start with 7 great cities between Delhi and Bombay, and then I think we are looking at the total number of 21 cities between all the main metros.
What is your greatest? What will be your greatest joy of here about the Make in India program, say 7 to 10 years from now? I'll say that Incredible India actually, in the end, turned out to be a remarkably successful program.
Right.
I mean, there were problems and all that, but it's still something that is stuck in our minds and in the minds of visitors. What will be your fears and your challenges?
I think biggest challenge is, like you were saying, the final guy on ground has to move at the same speed of everything else. Because, see, right now we have, I don't know whether you know, there is a separate group work with the government, this kind of organization called Invest India. You familiar with Invest India? Mm-hmm. So they are there to kind of what they call hand-holding process, right? So earlier, like, let's say a company comes and they want to set up a factory, they will go to Delhi, they'll wait for 1 year for permissions, and then all the regular drama happens, and they come to Maharashtra to set a factory. Maharashtra government is like, what? We are a BJP state, you got permission from Congress, right? And then you run around for 1 more year, by then you lose your license or permission, then you go back to Delhi, spend another 2 years. So in 5 years you finally have everything ready, and you turn up in some place like Pune, then comes the local politics. So you never set up a factory. Right now, right from the time you land in Delhi, there is a bunch of people will help you run through the whole process till the time you actually set up a factory. That thing is in place. But still, I don't know, like, when that final guy who's like at the municipal level or a collector level, like really believe in it genuinely to change, I think that will be the perfect situation for us.
Yeah, because the startup culture you were talking about are people setting up in their drawing rooms, in their bedrooms, so that's a slightly different kind of thing. Royal Britannia, I want to, or Cool Britannia. Royal Britannia is now so archaic, but in fact, James, Royal Britannia is the one brand that has survived. Cool Britannia, you're looking back and saying it's somewhat embarrassing. However, at that time, it did create a little bit of a stir, right? So are you saying this also, are you fearful that this also will be a...
I mean, I think So the question that you asked before about the difference between India and Bharat is a very bad one to ask a financial journalist. So you're a journalist and I'm a journalist, and we all know that we spend our time circulating amongst the elite, attempting to tempt them into indiscretions, and I certainly know nothing about the world of India outside the big cities, and so I'm a dreadful person.
Outside Colaba, you mean?
Yeah. So you also live in Churchgate, so you can't. But I think that the dilemma when you think about how you project a nation is, to get back to Incredible India rather than Make in India, is you have to choose what you're going to project. And so I think everyone here knows the image of Incredible India you'd see in an airport. It's tigers and hilltop forts and amazing colors with people with painted faces, and that is an image that foreigners quite like, and it's an image that is in some sense a great strength of India's, that I think many people outside of India sort of instinctively identify with Indian culture in a way that they don't with, say, South Korea. As an example, I don't think most people in Europe know anything about South Korea at all, really. And if you were to ask them to conjure up an image, they might reach for Gangnam Style, and that's probably about it. Yeah. Kimchi, Kim Jong-il, who's not even in South Korea. Whereas in India, you can kind of go dum 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 down this big long list. Lots of people are interested in the culture, they want to visit. But nonetheless, from a certain disposition, it's not clear that that is an accurate reflection of what India is, whether in all of its sort of manifest and multiple diversity. And I suppose that's when these projects, whether it's Cool Britannia or its Indian equivalent, that's when they become quite political. Now I think Make in India is a slightly different case. I mean, that's obviously political, but it's not quite in the same way. It has a more simple goal, I think, and so you would dispute it less. But when you bring it up to the idea of the nation, then this becomes quite complicated, because you're asking much more profound questions about how do we want to project ourselves in the world, how do we want to be seen, and does that accurately reflect how we are?
Yeah.
So we wind up with the question that was tossed to us at the beginning.
Yeah.
How has the media taken to it? Media usually say skeptical.
Yeah.
I have largely seen positive feedback, but how you read the media all over the country? What do you think?
You're talking about Make in India here?
Yes.
Make in India, I think media has taken it in the right spirit. We have not seen that much negative thing, but there is a plan now to actually have more and more interaction with media, especially with editors, to talk about what really is happening. Because otherwise, they are like shooting in the dark. They don't know, like often I get people at dinner table and asking questions, and I'm like, do you at least follow us on Twitter, or are you check on website? Everything is there. Oh no, we don't know anything. But so people also have just without having real information, they just like to kind of talk. I think so. We are trying to fix that now as a next step. And also there are many ideas where we want to now use technology to kind of make, get this whole Make in India program closer to, smaller industrial hubs. Let's say a place like Coimbatore. It can't be just Delhi and Bombay. So this Bombay thing is actually a big move towards that, because we want to take it out of Delhi to start with. So this after we finish Bombay week, we are going to focus more on now smaller towns.
And in fact, it's interesting you mentioned Coimbatore, because that's a classic case of a city that came up on its own, without any kind of push. In fact, a lot of hurdles. And so there are Coimbatores and there are Kanpurs and there are a whole lot of these other smaller places. Maybe a next year also, which is waiting to hear from you.
And they are the ones actually need help in terms of especially branding. In all the SMEs, they got all the great ideas and they got this big global kind of ambition and vision, but they just don't know how to kind of plug into the branding world and how to package themselves well. They are the ones actually need a bigger help than most of this.
Well, ideally, if we can, 5 years from today, the Kalagoda Festival can invite 3 of us again to review and discuss Make in India all over again.
Well, I would say that even if the Make in India campaign doesn't revolutionize Indian manufacturing, it's certainly provided a boon for people who can make statues of lions out of cogs.
Yes.
That is the one thing that there is absolutely no shortage of in Mumbai. There are lions made out of cogs everywhere, and whichever Chinese company it is that's making them is doing very well.
Yeah, that's the lion from the Gear Park,
Yeah.
the Gear Forest. Okay, I think there might be questions. Is there anything else we want to say? Because I think this is a chance to.
I think the one thing is that you asked, like, what will be the ideal thing, So one thing, like, personally for me is also to kind of just stop this word jugaad. But that's, I don't think we should.
Now you've started another discussion, another
Because
half hour.
that is something we should not celebrate, because that's been like a big problem, I know it's been like case study and everything. It's okay for like a poor farmer or someone who has to think of jugaad to figure out his life, but larger companies or corporations doing jugaad, I think it has to stop.
Actually, if that thought process has been incorporated at all, to say, why do all that when you can go, walk in, get your license, get your land, get your
Absolutely.
financial help,
Yeah.
that would have been a major cultural change in itself.
I think that it's important to first put that like a big platform, so that put pressure and then build everything. Now look at, there's a skill development ministry, which never we used to have. And they are training a lot of people. They're spending a lot of money training people. So there's a lot going on. I think the important thing is for all these to kind of come together, maybe in 3-4 years' time. Then I think we will see hopefully a different
I think if I get a final thought before we throw it open for questions, it would be this, which is, so I and my family have lived in India for 4 years now. We love it here. But it seems to me that India does have incredible, to use a rather horrible phrase, incredible soft power resources. Soft power being a theory in international relations that instead of having to beat people over the head with a stick or bribe them with a carrot, you can use other mechanisms to sort of get people to do what you want to do. They might share your values, they might empathize with your culture. And India, if you were to compare it with China, has stacks of these kind of assets, in which I would even count something like the Kalagoda Festival or the Jaipur Literary Festival, but the English language, Bollywood, music, its multiple religions, its democracy. There's something quite profound within India that in theory could be a source of enormous sort of international cultural strength, comparable really only with the United States. It's the only other country that has a film industry of that size, that is global and international, that is a superpower or a superpower in the making. And I suppose the dilemma for India is not every country has that. So how do you nurture it? What do you do with that? If you compare it with China, totally different situation, and really pretty terrible image in that regard. But it's not clear to me, I think that is a dilemma. Sort of what, if you have these assets, how then do you exploit them? How do you nurture them? How do you take what India has and make the best of it? And if I was Mr. Modi, in addition to doing things like Make in India, I'd be pondering that question, because it's not a very easy one to answer, and much would ride on it, I think.
So questions, anybody? Please, somebody will give you a mic. Or if you can. Question.
Nice and easy questions.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can we say that Make in India is a very strong marketing campaign? Because previous year we had an industrial corridor and we had a brand called Special Economic Zone. And of course, earlier we had a coalition government, so things used to get stuck. And now we have a decisive government. And at the same time, people are pulling out money from China and investing in India. Of course, first thing is that Make in India is a strong campaign, and secondly, luck favoring to India, as people are pulling out money from China and investing in India or Vietnam.
I think it's a really good point. So under the previous government, none of you have ever heard of the Special Economic Zone policy, right? Hands up. Anyone? Couple?
So the Special Economic Zone goes back to beyond that.
But this is what India's manufacturing brand used to be. The government would talk about having special economic zones, and I think it had absolutely no cut-through whatsoever. So.
Yeah, I think, you need, that yes, Make in India is a strong campaign. Sometimes you need a strong campaign to get everyone to kind of get behind something, right? Otherwise, what are you kind of like looking forward to? Like, I think sometimes just a simple campaign can create that. I think so Make in India is kind of beginning of that. And I mean, there's a lot to go. Like, we just launched it. I think in my head, the first 5 years is the launch phase for a program like this. It can't be, it's not a tourism campaign where you launch it. The first campaign we launched, 7% growth in the time of like terrorism, like there was a travel embargo, this part of the world, and all the hotels were shut down. That's when we launched the tourism campaign. And then more than the tourism industry, has helped a lot of other people who are doing business with other countries. It really helped them. So sometimes it just, this whole well-packaged brand or what a well-packaged campaign can put that pressure and that kind of energy behind something. So we're trying to do that actually.
I find it interesting that you launched Incredible India under UPA and Make in India under NDA.
Yeah, but see, this is the thing, like, so when we launched
and,
that...
at that time there was, as you said, there was terrorism going on.
Yeah. The tourism campaign suddenly became a Congress campaign. And this will now become BJP. It is not. It's a campaign from DIPP, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion. And the driver behind it is Amitabh Kant. When Prime Minister decided to launch it and get behind it, which he gets behind...
This is intimately associated with Modi.
No, of course. He gets behind every campaign. Yeah. Like all the initiatives he launches, he gets behind it. But this is like gone little further than most other campaigns. And same with, like that time there was a India Shining campaign. That was the BJP campaign. And that time, unfortunately, India was not shining. There were farmers suiciding, there were a lot of things going on, But the tourism campaign, it can't be like a Congress campaign, you know what I mean? It's a tourism campaign.
Well, I would not fully agree with that, because if one government takes one credit, the other government must get at least some credit.
No, everyone should take credit, but like especially something like tourism, it's a pure tourism campaign. You're pushing for...
And it continues till the day.
It continues, yeah.
Right.
It continues.
So it's not been shut down?
No, it's not.
Sorry, somebody else. There was, madam?
At the end of the day, I think it really depends for its success on the woman in the village, the man in the street, being proud to go to work, to be proud of the organisation they work for, being proud of their country, thinking of their country, of their company, not just of themselves. And I say this because I met someone in Coimbatore who has a copra business near Coimbatore, and his business is going well and growing, and he has many, many ideas, and there are opportunities. But at the end of the day, he depends on his workers coming to work on time, doing the best and doing what they're asked to do, wearing their safety gear and doing the right thing there and doing a quality job. I'm wondering if you've talked about removing red tape, and all those sorts of things I think are easy in comparison to changing the heart and soul or the attitude and values of the worker.
What's the question, madam?
So the question is, do you see that as a make or break point?
I think for our country it is a make or break point. I think this is the window we have to really make it. That's my personal view, because everything is kind of aligned for us to really come through as like the not just best manufacturing. I think we have this is our chance to really shine. From that point of view, I think it's a kind of make or break time.
There was somebody there.
Lady on the left.
Johnny?
Again, my question is an extension to the last question. Is like, Sunil, how much do you think the longevity of Make in India campaign is? And the second question is, Incredible India has many sub-brands like Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and all that. Does that dilute the main brand? Do you think is important, or should they go with one brand together?
Okay, so the first one, I think if government continue to put same amount of like commit to it for a long time, and they have to, then of course it's going to kind of last forever and ever and ever. And hopefully.
God
And
save us all.
I know. And the tourism campaign, ideally, everything should have been like one big thing. But I think in a country like ours, because every state and every corner has got its own kind of culture and things like that, I think it's okay to have like separate sub-brands. I don't think it dilutes Incredible India as a larger brand, you know?
In a funny way, when I come through airports, I tend to think that the regional sub-brands often they give you a sense of how good Incredible India is as a campaign, because you'll see these adverts for sort of Incredible Andhra Pradesh, which have a picture of a Soviet-era dam or a kind of muddy stream or something like that. And you look at it and you think, man, that's definitely not somewhere I want to go on holiday. Like, that's the last thing I want to do. Whereas if you see one of these Incredible India posters, it really sort of hits you at an emotional level that they've picked symbols and images of a country that are incredibly enticing and alluring. So in a weird way, I counterintuitively tend to think that when you look at these crummy state-level attempts to copy it, that actually it makes the main thing look much better, because by contrast, it's far stronger. So.
Yeah, please.
Interesting perspective, specific question. What kind of benchmarks do you use to say that branding has been successful? And for instance, I heard the comment a couple of times that Incredible India has been a tremendous success. Based on what? And also, while positive thinking is good, you need some contingency planning would be helpful too.
Let me have a crack at the first half of that. So the science of nation branding is really very poor, I think would be the way that you'd think of it. And so there are lots of attempts to do this, many of which, again, with respect to my co-panelists, are done by branding agencies who have really no place in doing any of this, and they're largely sort of spurious. And so if you look at the lists, there's no, some of them have France and Britain and Germany at the top, and some of them have Japan, and some of them have sort of Denmark and Finland. India tends to not appear. It tends to do very badly in the way that they get measured, except occasionally when there's some completely different methodology, and it happens to do very well. So I think what that tells you is that the sort of science of this is pretty bogus, and you have to treat it with a good deal of skepticism. Now that's different, I imagine, from individual marketing campaigns where you can measure their success much more effectively.
I don't think, campaign alone can do anything. It needs to be like heavily kind of connected to the ground. So, the tourism campaign, for example, I feel, which we've been shouting and screaming for the longest time, we cannot keep selling yoga and Ayurveda and backwaters and Taj Mahal, right? We need to build culture, right? If you don't build culture, numbers are dropping, and numbers are actually dropping. We are like almost kind of flat in terms of tourism numbers in most cities. If you look at a city like Agra should be making a lot of money just based on Taj Mahal, right? But actually Delhi makes money behalf of Agra. Because people come and, they stay in Delhi, take an early morning taxi or something, go see the sunset, take selfie and come back. Agra makes no money. Agra should be making shitloads of money because it's like, it's the place to go to, right? So if
Agra wasn't such a dump, then it would...
Yeah, also cleaning
that
up.
would help.
Absolutely, that would help. So if Agra had, like couple of museums and galleries and all that, he would stay one more day, So I think that's something everyone now needs to build. Like Kerala is slowly waking up to that thing. So Kochi Binale, for example, now people are planning the trips.
Around that.
Yeah, around that actually. So if you go that time 3 months, hotels are full. Like this year, Kochi is kind of, Fort Kochi normally like full. This year is not that good. But next year you see it's like buzzing with that energy. So I think sometimes like simple little cultural activity can just
I was going to say this earlier, Sid, actually. It's interesting if you think about the city we're in, Mumbai. So last week, the independent newspaper in my homeland said it would start using Bombay again, and Mumbai, Bombay. And it's interesting if you think of the branding of this city, and this is sensitive territory, obviously, but the old brand of Bombay, which was, one might argue, cosmopolitan, diverse, open to all comers, internationalist, global in outlook, and then the brand of Mumbai, which is rather different, Now, again, that's a kind of, each city within India has its own sort of attempt to build a kind of a sub-brand and an identity that will be appealing to foreigners. And Mumbai, I think probably, maybe Bangalore, because of the tech sector, has its own sort of set of brands. But Mumbai, more than any Indian city, I think, has that opportunity to project itself internationally.
No, so one of the things just on tourism, because you mentioned Agra and Bombay, Mumbai, is that you can't now bank on the traditional things that have been handed down to us over the centuries.
Yes.
You cannot.
You cannot, yeah.
The Biennale is something that was started with a lot of hard work by a handful of people 6 or 8 years ago or 6 years ago. They're going through a lot of tough times, but they're creating something.
Yeah.
So these new creations need to happen.
Of course.
Because otherwise the Taj will keep pulling people. But the younger set will want to come, and there may come a day when the Taj may fall out of favor also. It is quite possible because the younger set wants to come. I mean, Melbourne is a popular gay carnival, for example. Who knew that would be a kind of... So that would have to be the thinking. I find it interesting that the questions that are coming to you are also about Incredible India. See the residual impact of something that was started so many years ago. One more question.
To the ordinary man and woman in the street, we see the signs, your signs, make in India. Do these ordinary people really know what that means? Are you constantly feeding them information about what all that means? I mean, everyone that here is obviously interested and understands what Make in India is all about, but does the ordinary, everyday man and woman really know what's involved in that?
Will they know about Make in India?
I think people kind of know, but I don't know that they really know what it's supposed to do. Like I get calls from people saying that, hey, I want to partner the government to do something, you know. Like, in fact, someone had just come from US 2 days back and said, I want to work with the government. I'm like, what do you want to do? Like, I said, we want to partner government. We are like, they are only going to, you know, help you if you want to like partner a local company or, I think that education, I think we have to do a lot of work, you know, for everyone to understand the right, what do you call, the mindset of what Make in India is supposed to do. I think it'll take some more time.
I mean,
I don't think we've done that job that well. You know?
I suspect the intuition behind your question is right, that most sort of ordinary Indians wouldn't understand what it meant. I'm not sure that's a huge problem. I think the problem comes if your campaign is in some sense perceived to be insulting or kind of culturally insensitive, which I don't think this one is. I'm intuiting both of you are coming from Australia, is that right? And so Australia is a great example. You had the famously disastrous "Where the bloody hell have you been" campaign a few years ago, which was a big attempt to kind of rebrand Australia as this somehow welcoming country, which had the strapline, "Where the bloody hell have you been?" And not only did foreigners not like it very much, but Australians really hated it, and they had to can it pretty quickly. And so that, I think, is it's a good litmus test. If you look at a campaign like this, or you look at the branding, you look at the wording, and you think you don't like it, then you've done something wrong. So I think that's a good intuition to hold on to.
Yeah, a lot of the Make in India branding has been abroad through the Prime Minister's visits abroad. How far have we taken account of the underlying factors like the Skill India campaign? That hasn't been projected so much in the media.
Which campaign?
The Skill India.
Skill India, okay, right.
And the improvements to infrastructure as well that should go together with the Make India campaign.
It's a funny thing. I mean, I agree with you. There've been this slate of different campaigns, at least half a dozen of them, maybe a dozen of them, and they get different amounts of attention. So you're right that Skill India is much less prominent, and that's at least in part because no one can work out what it actually means. And that Make in India is partially more prominent because it gets more welly and more advertising money and cleverer people. But equally, it's answering a more precise problem than the Skill India campaign is. And I think that in some sense the success of these campaigns, like Swachh Bharat, it's a sort of simple idea, got to clean the streets, you have a simple logo, you get people behind it. Make in India also is a fairly simple idea, although the reality behind it is complicated. Whereas my sense is that Skill India is not a simple idea at all. I mean, it's a very complicated problem, and so I think it's more confusing. So I don't know what your sense is.
No, absolutely. Because, you know, the Skill India, they're doing a lot of work. I've had a couple of meetings with skill development people. And the training and the numbers of people, they're kind of people who are graduating from these institutions, like huge. You're right. I think it needs to be, I just feel, you know, some of this thing needs to be packaged much better, and it needs to be like much more stronger, you know, maybe campaign, so to speak. Make in India somehow, I think the whole ecosystem of...
You should be pitching for business now.
All the partnerships between us and, you know, the secretary in industries. I think when certain kind of people come together, it's got a certain kind of momentum and energy. Sometimes that doesn't happen, you know. I think skill development...
I might just say on that, because there have been a slew of campaigns.
Yeah.
Digital India
Yeah.
was one of the, you know, flavors of the month a few months ago.
Yeah.
And of course, that's very important because
Yes.
India is...
Yeah.
And one of the reactions that we were getting, I mean, we were reading
Yeah.
about, was people in the digital world saying, government should not take any interest in Digital India, get out of the way.
Right.
Because the entire digital world has come up without any help from the government.
Yeah.
So, you know, that is the one has to
Definitely.
Be very careful where you are. The heavy hand of the government sometimes can
True.
be a little...
You might not
I'm
all be
sure.
aware, but Sidharth is the editor of one of India's best news websites, so he's very sensitive on this point. So.
No, but we are not an e-commerce portal.
Right. No, I agree with you. Like, you know, sometimes they should just let them be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I've been getting signals. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sunil,
Thank you. Thank
James,
you, Sid. Thank you.
and Avid, thank you.